Welcome. As language teachers, it's not only important to master a language and to be able to teach it, but it's also important to understand some of the dynamics of that language. And the first question we have to ask ourselves is, what is a language? Linguists have asked this question over and over again, but the answer has been inconclusive so far. One of the most famous linguists, Max Weinreich, once said that a language is a dialect with an army and a navy. But surely we can all see that this might be a bit too straightforward. The fact that one considers languages and dialects to be two different concepts implies that there has to be some kind of distinction between the two on a global level. What kind of distinction can be made between languages and dialects? Let's take a look at English. We all agree that English is a language which stands on its own, but can be considered a collection of different dialects, such as Cockney, South African, Black, etc. All of these dialects can be understood by an English native speaker. But what if we compare English to its closest relative, Frisian? This language is mostly spoken in Northern Europe, and even though they are close relatives, no English speaker will understand it without training. This teaches us that one can try to make a distinction based on whether or not you can understand without training. Unfortunately, it's never this easy. The reason this distinction works for English is because of its lack of close relatives due to its history. But take a look at the next sentence. A Dane, a Swede, and a Norwegian walk into a bar and start talking. This could very well be the start of a good joke. Nonetheless, it's a very interesting situation, because it could easily happen in real life. All three of them could walk into a bar and start talking in their own native languages without having troubles understanding each other. Why is that? Well, those languages resemble each other so much that a Dane who moves to Sweden has to do nothing but adjust his or her native speech. There is no training needed, and they don't need to learn a new language. So the problem in this case is the fact that all three of them are considered languages, even though they look a lot more like dialects of the same language. We know by now that we can't easily distinguish a language from a dialect using only certain variables. However, the problem doesn't end there. When we talk about Chinese as a language, we know that it's a collection of dialects like Mandarin, Cantonese, and Taiwanese. And since they are dialects, one would expect to find some similarities, right? Wrong. In Mandarin, we say wo, ni, and ta for I, you, and he. But in Cantonese, we say no, lai, and ku. These two dialects couldn't be more different. It would be like comparing Swedish to French. So are they really dialects from the same language? And even more, how do we define a language like Chinese? At this point, we still haven't gotten any closer to finding a way to define languages and dialects as two different concepts. But there is one thing that can help us, and it is the existence of literature. It is said that the language is written and often standardized, which means that it can be used in literature. Dialects don't have that written component and often lack the standardization or the rules that are needed to be used on that level. Nonetheless, this comparison implies a couple of things. The fact that languages are used for literature and dialects are not could mean that dialects are of a lesser value than languages. It's supposed to be more unsophisticated to use a dialect when speaking compared to standardized speech. And since they lack specific grammatical rules, they are often far more complicated to apply. A good example is Archi, which is spoken in Caucasian regions. It has over 1.5 million different verb forms for one single verb. Whereas if you take the verb to walk in English, it consists of the forms walk, walks, walked, and walking. When you look at this, wouldn't it be better to say that Archie is the more sophisticated language? The main difference is that English has been put on a pedestal. It's standardized, but that doesn't make it any better than Archie. The main goal of a language is still to enable communication. So, what is the difference between a language and a dialect? Popular use tells us to look at the application. Both languages and dialects are spoken, but only languages have a written component. When we look at the signs, we see that the world is just one large cacophony of dialects, all flowing into each other, used next to each other, without real boundaries. There is only one thing we can be absolutely certain about, and that is that all languages are dialects. No distinction needed there.